News from where you live.
Welcome back. We'll now begin the prosecutor's debate. Each candidate, again, will have 2 minutes for opening statements. We drew out of a hat earlier before the debate started, and Earl McCoy will go first for these. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you all for coming. My name is Earl McCoy, and I'm running to be your prosecutor because it matters. It matters because thousands of cases each year are going unfiled. Thousands of criminals are walking our streets and being unpunished because cases haven't been filed. There are thousands of victims going without justice. When they do file the charges, often they wait a year, 2 years, 2.5 years to file charges. And I'm talking about serious cases, child pornography, drug dealing. But don't take my word for it. In the hallway, pick up a book of facts you need to know. For those of you watching at home, you can download this from our website at voteearlmccoy.com. The facts are in there. We need a prosecutor who's going to show up in court, get charges filed, and do it themselves. When a major case comes along, our elected prosecutor shouldn't be MIA. He should be in the courtroom trying those cases, not leaving them to a much younger attorney that's less experienced and has never tried a murder case before. I was in court today because I'm a trial attorney. One of the things I did while I was in court today was go to start the process to have a case dismissed because of lack of prosecution by the prosecutor. This case has been sitting dead in the water for 4 years, since 2014. It's a possession of marijuana case. But none of these cases should be going unpunished and unanswered. It's time we had a prosecutor in the prosecutor's office that cares about this community. I'm from this town. I was raised here, I raised my kids here, and now my grandchildren are being raised here. And I want to be in a place where criminals are held accountable. I'm asking for your vote. My name is Earl McCoy. Thank you.
And Pat Harrington.
Thank you. My name is Pat Harrington, and I am your Tippecanoe County prosecutor. I was born and raised here in Lafayette. I graduated Jefferson High School, Purdue University, and Valparaiso University School of Law. I was very fortunate that my first job was, in fact, as a deputy prosecutor in Lake County, Indiana, where in 4 years I prosecuted over 40 major felony jury trials. I was also very lucky that I met my wife up in Lake County. We moved back to Lafayette to raise our children. Both of our children are now grown and are on their own successful careers. My wife is employed here locally as a nurse in one of our hospitals. My office, the Tippecanoe County Prosecutor's Office, has 70 employees. We have 8 divisions. We have a budget of $4.3 million taxpayer dollars. I am proud of our success over my tenure as your prosecutor, a record as one based upon accomplishments and achievements. We've won 21 out of 23 murder cases. We convict 9 out of 10 major felons in jury trials. That's an increase of 1/3 from the prior administration. We also collect over $1 million a month for the support of our children in this county. I'm also proud of the initiative programs that we have launched successfully. One is the We Tip Hotline, the #1 program in the United States because you, the public, call it, because you want our community to be safe. I'm also proud of our high-tech crime unit, the only prosecutor's office in the state of Indiana that has one, and one of 3 recognized in the country to be associated with a major university. I'm very humbled that my legislators have asked me for their support to pass laws that are tough on crime, drug dealers, tough on drunk drivers and those who drive impaired, and also laws that make our students and our schools safe. I am Pat Harrington. I ask for your vote.
We will now start with the questions. The candidate directly answering the question will have 1 minute to respond. Then the other candidate will have 30 seconds to rebuttal. I will be keeping time and giving each candidate a 15-second warning. Once again, we drew numbers from a hat before the debate started, and Pat Harrington, you'll be answering the first question. Jeff and Trevor?
You both have been trial lawyers for years. Is there still a loss that haunts you? If so, briefly describe it and what you would do differently today.
I've been a criminal attorney for over 35 years, and I've tried approximately 90 jury trials. I don't remember all of my wins. I remember the 3 losses. and they all stand out in my mind. And one was it doesn't really matter what the case was, but you understand your losses. I've learned one thing about being a prosecutor. You always, you accept your wins and your losses the same way, with humility and professionalism. If they don't go your way, you try to figure out what went wrong, what went right. Is it an issue with how the evidence was presented? Is it a system error? Is it a human error? And then you learn from it and you move on. And that's how I train my young attorneys. Thank you.
And Earl, you may rebuttal.
Thank you. As a defense attorney, I can say none of my losses have haunted me. Some of my wins have haunted me. There's problems when you're able to secure a not guilty verdict when really a crime did occur. In fact, my most recent not guilty verdict on all counts, we tried and tried to get a plea to a misdemeanor. Instead, we had to go to trial and ended up with a not guilty on all counts. That's what haunts me.
All right, this next question is for Earl.
How many jury trials have you personally tried?
I've tried 20 jury trials. There's been a number of cases. Of those cases, 2 were major murder trials. For those in this community may recall, an attorney by the name of John Barsh was kidnapped and murdered. An attorney out of Benton County was kidnapped and murdered and found here in West Lafayette. I was lead attorney on that case, which is literally probably the largest case of the decade in sheer number of witnesses and law enforcement officers involved, and it was a very high-profile case. I was also involved in the defense of Darren Engler, who was convicted of murdering Jeremy Gibson.
Pat, you have 30 seconds.
Oh, thank you. Like I said, I've personally tried over 90 criminal jury trials in my career, spanning 35 years. And one of them was, in fact, Darren Engler, because I was the prosecutor against Mr. McCoy, who was the defense attorney. And that was a horrific, brutal murder where most of us remember that, where Jeremy Gibson was taken out into North County and beaten, made to dig his own grave, and then killed with an axe and a pick. And I remember that case very vividly.
This next question is for Pat.
How would you use your role as prosecutor to help solve the opioid crisis in Tippecanoe County?
Thank you. I've worked very hard for the last several years on the opiate heroin crisis. I've reached out to our state legislators, and they've passed laws this year, in fact, that restricts the number of opiate prescriptions for that doctors can write. And they also help us get rid of those prescriptions that are in the medicine cabinets, which we know that children might get to and start an issue with drug addiction. I've worked closely with the Tippecanoe County Drug-Free Coalition. We've had for the last 2 years an opiate crisis team which meets once a month. We work with faith-based organizations. We work with the social service providers. We've worked to start innovative programs within our communities, including education in the school. So for the last 2 years, I've worked both locally with our community and with our state legislators, and I'm proud of that record.
Earl, you have 30 seconds.
For those of you that may not know, I've been on the board of Home with Hope, a local halfway house, for the last several years. I'm very much in favor of treatment, but you must prosecute the individuals, put them on probation, order the treatment, and hold them accountable when they fall out of the treatment. Our biggest problem right now is too many cases are not being charged, they're not being placed on probation, and held accountable when they don't follow through with treatment.
This next question is for Earl.
What is your stance on the needle exchange program in Tippecanoe County?
I'm absolutely against the needle exchange program as it exists currently. It is giving individuals an item that they're not legally allowed to possess. It's fostering or enabling criminal behavior. I do understand and recognize the health implications of dirty needles. The problem is there's not enough oversight over the current exchange program, and the needles are not being returned in an appropriate fashion. We need to change those laws to allow a licensing procedure and other procedures to have more control over the needles, to make sure they're going to those individuals who are in fact licensed to carry them, so it's no longer a crime to have those needles, and they need to be held accountable for those needles. That's a way to try to deal with the needles on the street and also the health issues that arise.
And Pat.
Thank you. I'm also against the needle exchange, but let's make one thing clear. It's not against the law to have a needle on you. You can go to a drugstore and buy one, and that's not what's illegal. It's to use a controlled substance in combination with that needle. The current needle exchange program says it's there to help on the HIV and Hep C, but yet they do no blood testing. If in fact we're trying to help those individuals with those illnesses, I would think that they would implement drug testing so that individual would know they have that and they could start getting medical treatment.
This next question is for Mr. Harrington.
What is the biggest challenge that prosecutors face today?
My question?
Yep.
Thank you. Well, the challenge we have is the drug opiate crisis on our street. It has increased our arrests and the filing of our cases. In Superior Court 4 alone, which is Judge Zeman, which most of our low-level drug possession cases go, our number of cases filed went from 986 to almost 1,600 in 1 year, which poses a lot of significant challenges, both within our office to prosecute them, but also within the judge, clerk staffing, probation, and the community corrections. So that's the largest issue on our one single, is that opiate drug issue that faces us. I'm in favor of a jail-based treatment program, and I think it's time that Tippecanoe County has that in our community. In fact, on April 23rd, the Attorney General will be here to talk about a program which I support.
Mr. McCoy, you have 30 seconds.
What was the question again?
What is the biggest problem, what is the, sorry about that, I get confused too. What is the biggest challenge prosecutors face today?
All prosecutors are our prosecutors in this county. If we're talking about Tippecanoe County, the problem is the turnover in our inexperienced prosecutors. Since Harrington's been in office, 177 prosecutors have left county employment, or not prosecutors, employees of the office have left the office county completely, and 9 have transferred to the Tippecanoe County Public Defender's Office. As a result, out of the 70 employees they normally have, we just are left with inexperienced prosecutors.
And this next question is for Earl.
How will you keep victims up to date during the course of a case?
Well, the prosecutor's office is required by law through the victims' advocates to keep the victims notified as to certain things, court dates, plea offers that are being made, and sentencings and modifications. We'll continue those programs. Some of those programs are working very well within the prosecutor's office. So we'll do as much as we can and reach out to those victims and keep them apprised.
And Pat.
Thank you. One of the things I'm proud of is our domestic violence unit, where we provide free counseling for all victims of violence. And that includes whether it's a charged crime or it's a crime that they just want the counseling. I want to go back one question, because the information my opponent just gave is absolutely false. Those numbers are false, and the reason they're false, I have his freedom of information, is he actually asked, because he doesn't know when I took office, he asked for the information from the prior administration too. So he actually has he has the prior administration records and my record. So the numbers are not accurate.
Your time.
Here's his freedom of information
Time is up.
request.
Time is up. And Pat, you will receive this next question.
What makes you qualified to manage a nearly $4 million prosecutor's office budget and about 70 employees?
Thank you. I've been doing this for almost 11 years, and it takes a person who's skilled financially to understand the budget process. More importantly, you have to be financially responsible to meet your filing deadlines with your auditor, with your treasurer. You have to work with your counselor. You have to know what it means to manage a budget and pay your dues. Pay your claims. Remember, this is a taxpayer-funded office. It relies on taxpayers to pay their taxes, so we have the money to operate, just not my office, but the entire county. So based upon my experience of being under budget for 11 consecutive years with this budget, I believe I've shown the taxpayers of this community that I am fiscally able to handle the budget and operate in a very efficient method.
Earl, you'll have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I come to this job with more experience in that regard than Mr. Harrington had when he took the office. When he took the office, he had had just about the same number of years in practice that I've had, and just about the same track record, other than a couple of years as deputy prosecutor. My my undergraduate degree is in business management from Cranert School of Business, and I worked as an assistant Walmart manager, where our budget was actually much higher. We would have weekend days where we'd bring $300,000 in sales in one day. So I'm familiar with budgets, and I can operate within the budget.
This next question is for Earl.
It is well understood that prosecutors cannot discuss pending cases. However, as prosecutor, how will you make sure that there is maximum transparency in your office?
First off, by being available. Our current prosecutor spends a lot of time in Indianapolis. He likes to make note of the fact that he works on legislation, but if he wanted to be a legislator, he should really run for that office. I intend to be here. I will be here and accessible to our law enforcement via cell phone 24/7. I'll be in the office handling my own caseload. When things get heavy and we need filing to get done faster, I'll roll up my sleeves and I'll be in the office till midnight, just like I am now currently in my office. But I will be available when somebody calls and asks to schedule an appointment. I hear over and over again how many people, how many victims, the ones that have reached out to me and said, I've tried to talk to Mr. Harrington and I couldn't get through to him. I couldn't get an appointment. He's out of town 75% of the time, or at least out of the office 75% of the time.
And Pat.
You know, once again, my opponent just likes to make stuff up. I have the most transparent office here in the state. The local reporters know that. We push out every piece of information to them with filing of cases, with the dispositions, with the verdicts. I have the local reporters come back and tell me how nice it is to work with a prosecutor who pushes the information to them so they don't have to come to the courthouse and find it. As far as talking to victims, I talk to victims all the time. In fact, I just recently talked to a victim that you brought up, a landlord-tenant case, where you failed to tell that victim that the reason there wasn't a crime was because the individual actually destroyed their own property.
That's not accurate. That's just a flat lie.
This next question is for Pat.
As a prosecutor, how will you decide whether a case should be filed?
Actually, the easiest question to answer. The role of the prosecutor is to base their decision upon the Constitution of Indiana, United States, and the Ethics Code. The American Bar Association says the prosecutor's role is to be an independent minister of justice. We seek the truth. We're not to file against people who are not guilty, who are in fact innocent. We are to file against those who are guilty, and we can prove it in a court of law. It is the most ethical role you have because any person can file a police report and accuse a citizen of a crime. That doesn't make it a criminal case, and it should never be filed. Ethically, you cannot file it. I'm somewhat concerned about my opponent saying he's going to file every report that comes into the prosecutor's office as a crime. The reality is we receive reports daily from law enforcement. They're police reports, but they're informational only, and they do not raise to the level of being charged. Furthermore, the police actually put in those reports that they do not want charges filed.
Mr. McCoy?
That's politician Pat for you. It tells you what you want to hear, and it's just not true. Look at these documents in here. Look at the child porn case where the individual confessed. They seized the documents. Prosecutor's office didn't bother to look at it for 2 years, and no charges were filed, even when he confessed. The reality is Mr. Harrington wants to focus on conviction rates, and he won't file until he completely finishes the investigation. That's backwards. You file based on probable cause, you finish your investigation. If you later learn it's a crime, then you dismiss.
And Earl, this next question's for you.
Thank you.
What is your stance on current gun law in the United States? Should it be changed? If so, how?
I'm a very proud gun owner, and I carry on a regular basis. I do believe that every American has well, not every American who qualifies has a right to carry firearms. I do agree that the penalties for a firearm involved in a crime should increase. And I mean that even when they commit a crime and the firearm wasn't used in the crime, it was just present. The mere presence of firearms during criminal activity increases the risk of harm to the individuals, the police officers responding, and everybody in the community in general. So I would advocate for stronger penalties for those who illegally possess firearms or possess firearms when they commit a crime.
And Pat?
Thank you. And here I agree with my opponent, which is why I was asked to testify in 2016 to pass a tougher gun law and make it a mandatory non-suspendable. That's the way, you see an issue in your local community. And going to Indianapolis, I go to Indianapolis maybe 3 times a year. So that's not an issue. But what is important, when your local citizens and your police officers come up and point out a problem that affects our community, it also affects other communities. The only way to solve this is to have the law change, because we are enforcing, as a prosecutor, state law.
This next question is for Pat.
If elected, which tasks will you delegate and which tasks will be solely your responsibility?
Well, we have a staff of 70, and we have 8 divisions. It's a full-time job to administer and manage all those different divisions. One area that I do enjoy having a hands-on is the Drug Task Force, and I've worked with them for over 11 years. For 3 years, we had a joint FBI local drug task force operating in Tippecanoe County, and we went after those individuals who were moving in and out across county and state lines, and we were able to prosecute them locally and at the federal level. I was also very proud to be appointed by our U.S. Attorney as Special Assistant U.S. Attorney, which gave me federal law enforcement authority to prosecute at the federal level. I enjoy working with the Drug Task Force, and I enjoy working on the issue of drugs in our community, which is why I also support our local law enforcement. Our office has funded over 13 drug detection, drug narcotic dogs and bomb sniffing dogs, so we can go after those drug dealers who hide their drugs.
I will focus on the deputy prosecuting attorneys. Unfortunately, we've had so many leave and so many go to the public defender's office. The average years of experience of our deputy public defenders is 14 years. Average years of experience of our deputy prosecutors that try cases, about 2.5. They're even taking pay cuts to go there. Look at these documents. They're not false. My totals aren't. All of the documents are here. I did request 1 extra year, but my totals are based on his term.
The next question is for Earl.
I'd like to break the rules a little bit because I detect some interesting dialogue between the candidates. I wonder if the candidates would agree to each ask each other a question, and you get 90 seconds just to bounce off that. Would that be acceptable to the candidates? If not, we can stick with our format. We got a lot of questions here. We can stick with these.
It's probably safer if we stick to our format.
Okay, we'll stick to the formatted questions. That's perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. If you are elected, Mr. McCoy, what would your personal caseload look like?
My personal caseload will be major felonies. I only intend to try murder trials unless there aren't a number of murder trials, then I'll try other major felonies. But my focus is mentoring. I've mentored many attorneys over the years, and I do it much differently than Mr. Harrington's office. For example, the public defender's office contacted me a year and a half ago and begged me to take a case, the Stephen Burns case, because nobody else would take it. He'd asked for a speedy trial. There was only 30 days to get prepared for trial. On top of my already busy caseload, I mentored another attorney. We worked every night from 6 p.m. until midnight, watching 60 body cam videos. But we did it together, because that's how I teach somebody to prepare a case. And then when we try a case together, I'm first chair. That attorney's second chair. Until we get to the point that they're ready to be second chair, or first chair and I'll be second chair, then I turn them loose. That's what we need. That's how you train deputy prosecutors, mentoring.
And Pat, 30 seconds.
Thank you. Personally, right now, I supervise directly all our major crime felony deputy prosecutors, which includes a caseload of 360 major felonies. I meet with them weekly, and I prep them for their trials. I work with them on their pretrial debts, and I actually cross-examine some of our witnesses, so I act hands-on. Secondly, in all our murder cases, this is the system that we worked out between my chief deputy, Kristen McVeigh, and myself. I've handled 15 murder cases out of the 23 in Tippecanoe County. We decided early on that we would rotate those cases when they came in, so we always had someone in charge and leadership while the other one was in court.
And I believe we have time for one more question. So, Pat, you'll answer this first.
The role of a prosecuting attorney can be tough and thankless. How will you work to retain your employees?
I'm very proud of what we do here. And the model of the prosecutors is we do hire young attorneys out of law school, and they do work for us for 3 to 5 years. And then they have such tremendous experience, they move on. They can make far more money than we can pay them in government. And I'm proud of the legacy of my children. I call them my kids. I mean, he's attacked me on this issue, but let's look at this. I have 3 former deputy prosecutors or judges. I have 6 that work for the federal government, and 2 of them are now assistant U.S. attorneys. The first time in the history of this office, we have deputy prosecutors that were hired by the federal government as prosecutors. I have 6 others who moved on to other prosecutors' office, not because they didn't want to be in my office, but they had higher vertical movement, and now they're chief deputies, trial supervisors. So I'm very proud of the fact that my attorneys have moved on and are very successful. And in fact, my local competition, these really good law firms in Lafayette, they are so impressed with my young attorneys, that's who hires them. And that's America. You have the right to pursue your dream.
And Earl.
I'm going to retain those attorneys by mentoring them, working with them hand in hand, showing them how to teach or how to review cases and handle cases. One of these attorneys he's talking about just recently came to my office. That's where I was informed that Mr. Harrington's out of the office 75% of the time. I was also informed that that deputy prosecutor didn't feel like they ever had a legitimate conversation with Mr. Harrington. They're supporting me because they've worked with me for years as an attorney, and they know we can have a conversation.
We will now have our closing statements. Each candidate will get 1 minute. Earl, you will go first.
Please go online, download this document, pick them up in the hallway. These are the facts. This is now the 4th time, you don't all know it. It's the fourth time we've faced off. Every single time he calls me a liar. There is nothing I've talked about that has not been documented. Nothing. Mr. Harrington, politician Pat, he just says stuff. I've never seen a document. I've not seen his record. I've challenged him in my videos on social media to give me the names and cause numbers of the trials he's had. Of those murder trials he talked about, tried to lead you to believe that he has handled 15 of those murder trials, I found 2 where he actually showed up for trial. Of those murder trials, only 10 went to trial. I will be in the courtroom. I'm in the courtroom every day. I was in the courtroom today getting one of their cases dismissed because they've failed to prosecute it. I'm asking for your vote because I care about this community and it matters. It matters to me, and I hope you vote for me because it matters to you.
And Pat.
Thank you. And just in mentioning, I had the opportunity to look at who the former attorneys were for my opponent, and he only has 1 attorney position. In 11 years, he's had 9 attorneys come and go, which is approximately a 90% turnover rate. Anyway, I've been your prosecutor for the last several years. I'm very proud of our achievements and our record. We have success in the courtroom. We have successful programs. We have crime prevention programs. We have received, this office has received national and state awards for victims protection, for advocating for women in abuse and domestic violence. Our attorneys are highly trained and skilled. That's why other people want to hire them from us. And more importantly, I'm very passionate about being your prosecutor. I'm passionate about protecting our public safety in the courtroom, in the community, in the schools. And that's why I ask for your vote in this election.
Thank you to our 2 candidates, and thank you to Faith Community Ministries for letting us have this debate tonight. Have a good evening.